Hey YouTube, Jokestrap here with another episode of Game Talk. Pokemon. It's a game that has shaped the childhoods of many a gamer, young and old alike. It captivates us with RPG elements used in its own way, so much so that it has defined a generation of RPGs attempting to emulate its style. But one thing that has never been agreed upon or fully understood is its lore. Pokemon is a story that, unlike any other, is told from so many different perspectives that it is difficult to understand what is supposed to be the truth. This is most apparent when considering the first question of the Pokemon world. Where do Pokemon come from? For years, people have been coming up with theories and understandings about how Pokemon come to be. And at first, they seemed to be simple. But as more incarnations of Pokemon came into being, the initial ideas became much more strained and implausible. However, I today think that this Pokemon world has both a much simpler origin and a much more interesting one than what people tend to think. And surprisingly, it all stems from Mr. Mime. But before I get into that, I better explain some of the previous notions that became harder and harder to justify. In the original Pokemon games Red and Green, and by extension Blue and Yellow too, there was a story told beneath the surface about the origin of Pokemon. It was said that there was an ancestor to all Pokemon that contained all the genetic material of any Pokemon that ever was, a first ancestor, and the oldest and most ancient Pokemon that became known as Mew. It was said that Mew became all other Pokemon through a more Darwinian idea of evolution. And for most people before Generation 3 and 4, they thought that this was the thing that explained everything. It doesn't, but I'll explain that later. Skip forward to Generation 4 of Pokemon. The Sinnoh region of the Pokemon world has a lore that tells the story of a first celestial egg existing in the ether of the chaotic void. Upon hatching, this entity known as Arceus created two beings that embodied time and space, as well as three lesser beings that embodied the essence of spirit. From these Pokemon and the sixth, Giratina, behind the scenes, all reality and matter and antimatter in the universe came into being. On the surface, this seems to be an explanation of everything. That, for some reason, is read as an absolute truth. But like the Mew origin, it doesn't explain everything either. This is where the infamous Mew versus Arceus debate stems. Is Mew the ancestor of all Pokemon? How can there be another Pokemon that is the first Pokemon? If Arceus created everything in one way or another, does that mean that Arceus created Mew too? It ends up being this very circular debate, not unlike theological debates in real life. The twist is, ever since the first generation, we've had a real answer, but it took several generations for it to become obvious. Although not necessarily the originator of these ideas, Tumblr user Brad O'Farrell posted an entirely different idea of how this world works in a post about unnatural Pokemon that have human origins. Their main point is this, and I quote, "Pokemon come into existence to reflect memes from the collective human consciousness." Now, what does that mean exactly? A collective consciousness is a shared set of beliefs, ideas, knowledge, moral attitudes, etc. that exists within a society. The key word being society. This is where everything clicks. And it all begins and ends with Mr. Mime. Answer me this. In both the divinely inspired Pokemon world and one that evolved naturally, what real reason is there for a creature that behaves like a human mime to exist? Why are there caves full of wriggling, waving, white-faced mime creatures waiting to engage human children in battle? I'm sure someone could stretch and try to justify it, but it really doesn't add up. What are mimes for Pokemon? It doesn't seem like there needs to be any. But for humans, mimes are a cultural idea, a role in our society. And from that, in this Pokemon world, Pokemon that reflect this idea begin to exist. This point is where the entire Pokemon universe unravels. All the Pokemon that seem to spontaneously exist from things like garbage and pollution exist because there is a thought that things like pollution and landfills could create abominations and dangers, punishing us for destroying the natural world. Kling is an example brought up by Brad O'Farrell, being a very unnatural creature that spontaneously began to exist during the Industrial Revolution. Around the same time gears were being made and understood in function, Pokemon that are living gears began to exist in this world. In this sense, perhaps this very contemporary Pokemon world parallels us in ways we didn't expect. This is what I think the most compelling concept is in this meme theory. Pokemon come from the things that we share in thought, but they also seem to stem from the things we share in story. Legendary and mythical Pokemon and some regular Pokemon seem to only exist because of legends and stories that were told about them between people. And from these stories, a legend becomes a Pokemon and not the other way around. Think of it like this. Lapras is based off the Loch Ness Monster in real life. They don't evolve or have a pre-evolution, they don't get seen on land, and they are very, very rare. However, on rare occasions, they are seen. Suppose that one day, some person sees a large bit of driftwood in the water and mistakes it for a prehistoric creature. They then tell this story to others, and more people begin to believe that it's there. All of a sudden, now they are real shelled prehistoric Lapras swimming around in the seas, not because they've always been there, but because we as a collective thought they were. Another example is the legendary beast trio, Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. Some accounts say that they have real natural origins, like Entei being born from volcanoes erupting, or Raikou being spawned from lightning striking. These on their own could be people mistaking things during real-world events for these Pokemon coming to exist. But the burned tower story from Gold and Silver gives another explanation. It is said that when the tower burned, 3 unnamed Pokemon perished. Why are they unnamed? What if, in this, instead of there actually being 3 Pokemon inside, there was not? And the creaking and tearing of the wood and metal inside this tower was mistaken for living creatures perishing inside. The people witnessing this could have believed that there were, and as a result, the legendary Pokemon Ho-Oh returned to revive the non-existent Pokemon, thusly making 3 Pokemon flee the burning tower when there weren't any to be there before. But what about a very scientific idea? Perhaps Pokemon scientists wanted to find out where Pokemon came from, so they started looking for a theoretical first ancestor to all Pokemon. And this idea they shared resulted in an actual ancestor Pokemon to come into existence to be found by them, be it in person or via fossils, which then they told colleagues about, and then they created a large-scale collective idea that this Pokemon is incredibly elusive and mysterious, like a mirage. Thusly, Mew began to exist. Or how about this very religious idea? In Hoenn, stories get passed down about a huge natural disaster, with volcanic eruptions and tsunamis being attributed to Pokemon, massively powerful ones that were said to have created the entire region. How could they create an entire region? What was there before, a big hole? Surely the story couldn't actually be true. But, as a result of the story being passed down, Groudon and Kyogre began to exist, in the slumber people thought they were to be in during their absence. In Sinnoh, a society full of culture and legends, it may have been a different creation myth passed down through the generations, like the egg in a void, hatching to create all that ever was. Like most religions in real life, this is a regional myth. It isn't corroborated by any other regions historically, and the locals believe it's true. But because they share the belief that it's somewhere out there, there's this god Pokemon and its legendary disciples, these creatures and their power begin to exist. With this collective consciousness theory, literally every Pokemon that wasn't just made by humans can be explained. This world seems to parallel ours in many ways. Maybe legends of mythical creatures and missing links in our world became real in theirs. And if that's the case, it makes you wonder what's going to happen next. Do you believe in the collective consciousness theory? Are you a Pokedarwinist or a Pokemon creationist? Tell me what you think about this theory in the comments below. If you liked this video, like it, share it, and subscribe if you want me to do more videos like this. This has been Jokestrap with Game Talk.